Muy buenas tardes para todos. En nombre de la Facultad de Comunicación de la Universidad de La Sabana y específicamente del Doctorado en Comunicación, les damos la bienvenida a la Cátedra Éric McLuhan 2020, titulada Ecología de Medios, Periodismo y Participación Ciudadana, Ejes de Investigación en el Ecosistema Digital Contemporáneo. El día de hoy realizaremos nuestra primera sesión, Ecología de los Medios para un Futuro Sostenible, Visiones desde el Presente, a cargo del profesor internacional Paolo Granata de la Universidad de Toronto. La Cátedra Éric McLuhan es un espacio permanente de reflexión y discusión en torno al estudio de la comunicación, que propicia el encuentro de investigadores reconocidos, estudiantes, profesores y profesionales interesados en la formación académica de alto nivel. Esta jornada se realiza cada año como parte de las actividades del doctorado en comunicación y su nombre rinde homenaje al doctor Eric McLuhan, quien nos acompañó en el desarrollo de las primeras actividades académicas de este programa. Antes de iniciar con nuestra programación, les informamos que para facilitar la confirmación de su asistencia, les agradecemos ingresar al enlace publicado en el chat de preguntas y respuestas y diligenciar la información solicitada, lo cual no le tomará más de 2 minutos. Recuerden que si participan en las 3 sesiones de nuestra cátedra, recibirán un certificado digital de asistencia. Las próximas 2 conferencias se realizarán el jueves 15 de octubre con el profesor internacional Ramón Salaverría de la Universidad de Navarra y el jueves 12 de noviembre con la profesora Ana María Córdoba de la Universidad de La Sabana. A continuación, damos inicio a esta jornada instalando el evento con la intervención de nuestro decano de la Facultad de Comunicación, el doctor Manuel Ignacio González Bernal. El doctor Manuel González es comunicador social y periodista de la Universidad de La Sabana, magíster en educación del Instituto Tecnológico y de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey y doctor en comunicación por la Universidad de La Sabana. Cuenta con 15 años de experiencia directiva, docente e investigativa universitaria. En el campo de la comunicación, su trabajo se ha centrado en las teorías de la comunicación, la opinión pública, el análisis de audiencias y las metodologías de investigación. Sus intereses de investigación se han centrado en el estudio del currículo universitario en comunicación, la formación por competencias y la investigación de audiencias de medios de comunicación. Bienvenido, decano. Adelante.
Muchas gracias, Angélica. Un saludo muy especial a todas las personas que en esta tarde nos acompañan en la instalación de la Cátedra Éric McLuhan 2020. Por deferencia con nuestros invitados, Andrew y Paolo, voy a partir mi saludo en 2 partes. En la primera parte me voy a dirigir a ellos en inglés y posteriormente voy a cambiar para dirigirme a toda la audiencia en español. Entonces, bueno, yo creo que vamos iniciando. Nuevamente les agradezco. Mr. Andrew McLuhan, founder of the McLuhan Institute and son of Professor Eric McLuhan, to whom this academic space is dedicated. Mr. Paolo Granata, president of the Media Ecology Association, Media Ethics Lab Director and Professor in Book and Media Studies at St. Michael's College, University of Toronto. Academic authorities, professors, researchers, undergraduate and graduate students who join us today, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Faculty of Communication at Universidad de La Sabana, I want to thank all of you for accepting our invitation to the 2020 Eric McLuhan Chair, a space for reflection and academic debate promoted by our doctorate program in communication. I especially want to thank Andrew, who from the starting days of the program has been a faithful, close friend and has encouraged us to follow the intellectual path proposed by his grandfather Marshall and his father Eric. Special thanks also to Professor Paolo Granata for sharing his reflections on the ecological perspective and its importance for sustainability and the future. Paolo, welcome to our university. Before I switch to Spanish, I want to let you both know that we value your time and willingness to share your thoughts and expertise with us. Thanks again, and remember that you are part of our school family. Señoras y señores, hace 2 años, en octubre de 2018, nos reunimos más de 300 personas en la ciudad de Bogotá para dar la bienvenida al programa de doctorado en comunicación de la Universidad de La Sabana. El tiempo pasa muy rápido. En ese entonces el programa nacía. Ese día tuvimos la providencial suerte de tener entre nosotros al doctor Eric McLuhan, quien acompañado de Lance Strait, profesor de Fordham University, y de Sergio Roncallo, profesor de nuestra facultad, nos ofreció la conferencia central del evento, llamada Media Ecology in the 21st Century. Eric y Sergio, lamentablemente, han partido, los dos de manera inesperada. Así, hoy quiero dedicar esta cátedra a su memoria y a través de ella quiero agradecerles el legado que dejaron a sus estudiantes, colegas y a la comunidad académica en general. Las ideas de Eric y de Sergio son una invitación, un camino para seguir avanzando en la construcción de pensamientos sobre medios, comunicación, tecnología, humanidades, ética, sociedad y futuro. En la estupenda intervención que hizo Eric la noche del lanzamiento del doctorado, la última de su vida, se remontó a los orígenes de la perspectiva ecológica en el estudio de los medios. Reflexionó sobre la importancia actual de profundizar en esta aproximación a la comunicación y nos recordó que en el entorno mediático y tecnológico de hoy, que está en pleno renacimiento, resulta central pensar y repensar permanentemente los profundos lazos que existen entre tecnología, comunicación y sociedad. Esa noche, Eric nos invitó a establecer vínculos más cercanos y activos entre la academia y la realidad social. Nos pidió no limitarnos a estudiar los ambientes y los fenómenos, sino a dar un paso adelante, buscando influir en ellos, transformarlos e incluso crearlos. Eric, con su audaz intelecto y su profunda fe, nos pidió que fuéramos valientes, que tuviéramos coraje y que desde proyectos como nuestro doctorado impactáramos al mundo. Por eso, este espacio toma su nombre, Cátedra Éric McLuhan, porque desde acá queremos promover el pensamiento, la palabra y la acción que contribuyan a construir un mañana mejor para nuestro continente. Poniendo la mirada en América Latina y especialmente en Colombia, y por supuesto aplicando las ideas de Eric, vemos la urgencia de ayudar a nuestras naciones a pensar en clave local, a aprender de los maestros de otras latitudes, por supuesto, pero siempre generando un pensamiento auténtico y autónomo, que responda a las múltiples y complejas realidades de una América llena de retos propios. En este punto, recuerdo también al maestro Roncallo, amigo de todos nosotros, de muchos de los que estamos hoy conectados. Sergio, con inusitada agudeza intelectual, siempre supo poner a conversar a los demás, a los más diversos autores y pensadores globales, con la realidad de América Latina, de Colombia, de Bogotá e incluso de su barrio. Creo que esa característica de su visión se sintetiza muy bien en el título de la conferencia que Sergio compartió la noche del lanzamiento del doctorado en octubre, hace 2 años. Yo creo que todos la recordamos, tuvimos la fortuna de publicarla posteriormente en un libro. Esa conferencia se llamó El Sur es el mensaje. Muy sugerente, muy relacionada con la idea que estaba transmitiendo. La cátedra que iniciamos hoy, esta versión 2020 de la Cátedra Éric McLuhan, justamente trata de ser fiel a este legado y por eso plantea desde una mirada ecológica 3 temáticas que son centrales para el funcionamiento de la sociedad: la sostenibilidad, el periodismo y la participación ciudadana. Escucharemos profesores, investigadores de diferentes partes del mundo, también de Colombia, y pondremos estas ideas en debate y en reflexión para que cada cual pueda hacer su síntesis y para que podamos construir ese conocimiento informado, pero local y pertinente. Al respecto, el profesor Granata hoy nos hablará sobre el potencial holístico que tiene la ecología de medios para descubrir y aprovechar las posibilidades del ambiente tecnológico en procura de un cambio social positivo. En este sentido, presentará el estado actual de la investigación en este campo y mostrará que desde él se pueden estimular, diseñar y prototipar ideas que busquen un futuro sostenible. El próximo jueves 15 de octubre, más o menos en un mes, en la segunda entrega de la cátedra, nos acompañará Ramón Salaverría, vicedecano de investigación de la Facultad de Comunicación de la Universidad de Navarra y profesor de ciberperiodismo y medios digitales reconocido internacionalmente, también profesor de nuestra maestría en periodismo y comunicación digital. Ramón abordará las posibilidades que tienen actualmente los investigadores del mundo, basadas en metodologías cuantitativas de gran alcance, para impulsar un nuevo paradigma de conocimiento sobre medios digitales y así poder ayudar a apoyar al desarrollo de estos. Finalmente, el jueves 12 de noviembre, se realizará el cierre de la Cátedra Éric McLuhan 2020 con la presentación de la doctora Ana María Córdoba, profesora de la Facultad de Comunicación de nuestra universidad, quien analizará la participación política a través de los medios digitales y mostrará nuevos caminos para entender las formas latentes de participación que subyacen en el entramado de las redes sociales y el Internet. Como ustedes pueden ver, tenemos un nutrido programa. El formato de la cátedra este semestre cambió, suele ser un evento de un día, por las condiciones de pandemia en la que estamos viviendo en este momento en el mundo, decidimos abrirla a 3 sesiones diferentes para que la podamos aprovechar más, para que la disfrutemos más y para que tengamos tiempo de digerir entre una y otra entrega las propuestas intelectuales de los autores. Bienvenidos a la Facultad de Comunicación de la Universidad de La Sabana, bienvenidos a la Cátedra Éric McLuhan. Esperamos que las ideas que acá se compartirán resulten interesantes y provechosas en el camino por entender el profundo proceso de transformación que está atravesando la comunicación y la sociedad en este momento. Para todos, una excelente tarde y por favor disfruten de este espacio. Adelante, Angélica, muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, decano, por la introducción. El día de hoy también nos acompaña Andrew McLuhan, hijo del profesor Eric McLuhan, inspirador de esta cátedra, gracias a su acompañamiento en las primeras actividades, o más bien desde las primeras actividades del doctorado en comunicación. Por cerca de una década, Andrew fue el asistente, estudiante y compañero de viaje de Eric McLuhan, acompañándolo en giras de conferencias por varias regiones del mundo, e involucrándose cada vez más en la tradición única que la familia McLuhan ha desarrollado en los estudios de la cultura y la tecnología. Andrew es actualmente el director del McLuhan Institute, creado en 2017, para continuar el trabajo iniciado por Marshall McLuhan y ejecutado por su hijo Eric, en la explicación y entendimiento de las relaciones entre cultura y tecnología. Este año, Andrew compró la granja de sus padres y se encuentra haciendo la documentación de los archivos y el inventario de la biblioteca de Eric McLuhan, una amplia colección de títulos. De esta forma, se encuentra preparando un curso de 12 semanas sobre el trabajo de Marshall McLuhan, Entendiendo los medios, que iniciará a partir del sábado 3 de octubre y se extenderá hasta el 19 de diciembre. A partir de este momento, las intervenciones se realizarán en inglés, por lo que si lo consideran necesario, pueden activar la opción de Closed Caption en la parte inferior de sus pantallas. De esta forma, damos la bienvenida a Andrew McLuhan. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being here with us.
Gracias, Angélica y Manuel. Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por invitarme esta noche para abrir la Cátedra Éric McLuhan 2020. Tuve la gran idea de leer mi discurso en español, pero después de haber intentado leer mi discurso en español, decidí que leer la versión original en inglés sería lo mejor para todos. So, thank you very much for having me here today. It really is my pleasure. There is, thank you. There is a delicate balancing act to be had when considering tradition and innovation. Tradition gives you familiarity and guidance and confidence, a home. But while roots can nurture, they can also hold one in place. Innovation for innovation's sake is dangerous. It certainly isn't wise to abandon the lessons learned through trial and error, sometimes hard won. But if one never ventures beyond home, beyond the comfortable, one misses opportunities for growth, progress. Media studies is a discipline where tradition and innovation meet. A relatively new field, it grew out of other more established traditions in literature, social studies, among many others. It is a field whose nature is necessarily interdisciplinary simply because the effects of technologies are total, not a simple matter of economical, physical, psychological, biological, historical, sociological concern. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us, as John Culkin said. As Marshall McLuhan noted, understanding is not a point of view. It comes not from one single place, but especially where media studies are concerned, understanding comes from an environmental survey. One of Marshall McLuhan's most popular books, The Medium is the Massage, points to this in its subtitle, An Inventory of Effects. This is the second Cátedra Éric McLuhan, and it is certainly my honor to be asked to say a few words ahead of this year's notable speakers. Here we have a curious thing, the beginning of a tradition built on innovation. I've said this is the second Cátedra Éric McLuhan, but I see it as the third event. The first was in 2017 when Eric McLuhan, along with Lance Strait and Sergio Roncallo, gave speeches marking the launch of the doctoral program in communications at La Sabana. What an evening that was at El Nogal, celebrating a substantial achievement, announcing to Colombia, the Americas, the world, that here at La Sabana was academic excellence. Eric, Lance, and Sergio all had important things to say that evening, each representing their tradition in doing it proud. Proudest among them that evening was, I believe, your own Sergio. An integral part of the program, a local with strong passion for his home, his school, his work, Sergio declared that the South is the message, and I believe Colombian hearts shouted it back. Of course, the day following that wonderful night, tragedy struck as my father, Eric McLuhan, was suddenly taken seriously ill at our hotel and died a short time later at the hospital. We were to fly home that evening, and instead I flew home a few days later with his ashes. This yearly event has been named in his honor, and it is a great honor to him, his work, and his family that he be recognized in this way. We will always be grateful. I am personally grateful for so much. In my time of great need, feeling alone and very far from home, I was wrapped in La Sabana's embrace and all of a sudden had a family, a home. This institution is not a cold clinical university, but is a community of very kind people, passionate about their work and caring about each other. I lost my father that day, and I know it might sound dramatic or even insincere, but my heart knows the truth that I gained a second home and several family members. I won't embarrass them by naming them all or myself by forgetting anyone. As you might imagine, it was a somewhat surreal time. And in those few days, several people showed me such kindness, and though I hold that dearly and remember many faces, I'm afraid I don't remember all the names. Please know that while I forget a name, I'll never forget a kindness. One person who I stayed in touch with a bit, who I could never forget, was La Sabana's own Sergio Roncallo. For several reasons, Sergio holds a special place in my heart. On first meeting, I knew this was someone I would get along with. We both played guitar in bands, both didn't quite fit the mold, but still followed our interests, Sergio quite impressively. On that terrible day, Sergio was first to find me at the hospital, and I can still feel his arms around me. Later, he and Edward picked me up from my hotel and took me to his place where we had a few drinks and played some music and took the sting off the day. Last year, when I was back in Bogota for the first Cátedra Éric McLuhan, I was really looking forward to seeing him, but he was unfortunately not well. I hadn't realized how sick he was. And this March, it was a total shock to find out that Sergio died. It is still a shock. My heart and sympathies go out to you, his friends and family and colleagues. Sergio had such a career ahead of him, and this program, this university, are poorer for the loss. But if Eric McLuhan's untimely death made him a sort of patron saint of the doctoral program at La Sabana, Sergio's makes him one as well. And I don't think you could do much better than having those two looking over your shoulders. To say that one represents tradition, the other innovation, is not possible. Both Eric and Sergio were serious scholars who put in the work and earned their places. But they were also both leaders, explorers, innovators. I know that it was Sergio's dream to build a program here that would lead a sort of intellectual revolution here in Colombia and Latin America. I know that he believed that you were ready to use your unique voice and lead the way for your own approach to add another vital branch to the field. I know that Sergio believed you didn't have to simply follow the traditions, but you had important, unique contributions to make, a new school of media ecology to found. I believe this is what he was urging when he proclaimed, "The South is the message." My father was encouraging that. As he wrapped up his speech, Media Ecology in the 21st Century, Eric McLuhan let his final words be of encouragement to you, just beginning this doctoral program. He said, "You are starting something new. Have the courage to find new ways to do it." Courage. As students begin their academic year in a rather strange set of circumstances, I encourage you to follow Eric and Sergio's lead. Have the confidence of your traditions, your skills. Use them to meet the challenges before you and not just get through, but excel. Use this opportunity to find new ways. Be bold. There's little time for playing it safe. Take chances, push, probe, explore. I'm speaking of academic matters. Don't take chances with your health. Wash your hands. The three speakers this year have all distinguished themselves academically. Paolo Granata and Ana Maria Cordoba I know personally, and I'm looking forward to their talks. I regret I have not met Ramon Salaviera, but research quickly shows he is distinguished and a respected academic. Each of this year's speeches promises to be worthwhile and the best kind of time well spent, informative and intellectually stimulating. I'm very much looking forward to each of the presentations and thank La Universidad de La Sabana for presenting the opportunity to give us the benefit of their experience and research. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Andrew, por tu intervención. Thank you, Andrew, for being here with us today and for your intervention and participation in this chair. It means a lot to us. Continuamos ahora con la conferencia Media Ecology for a Sustainable Future, Visions from the Present, Ecología de los Medios para un Futuro Sostenible, Visiones desde el Presente, por el doctor Paolo Granata de la Universidad de Toronto, en Canadá. Les recordamos que en el chat encontrarán el enlace en el cual podrán registrar su asistencia a la jornada de hoy, así como podrán también formular sus inquietudes para el conferencista. Estas dudas serán seleccionadas y formuladas al final de la intervención del profesor Granata. El doctor Granata es profesor en el programa de estudios sobre libros y medios de la Universidad de Toronto en St. Michael College. Se unió a la Universidad de Toronto después de pasar 15 años en la Universidad de Bolonia en Italia, donde estableció casi por completo su propia carrera académica en investigación, docencia y participación pública. Es el coordinador del programa de estudios de libros y medios y además el director del Laboratorio de Ética de Medios de la Universidad de Toronto. También es presidente de la Media Ecology Association. Y desde octubre del 2018, el profesor Granata es miembro del Comité Ejecutivo de la Comisión Canadiense para la UNESCO, como presidente de la Comisión Sectorial de la Cultura, Comunicación e Información. Bienvenido, Profesor Granata. Welcome, Professor Granata. It's a pleasure to have you here in our event today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure for me. I'm really honored to be here with you tonight. I wanted to express my gratitude to the director of the Doctorado en Comunicación, Angela Preciado Hoyos, and then thank you, Manuel, Angelica, Maria, Jonathan, such a beautiful group of people and human beings. I feel very welcome to be here with you tonight, and thank you all attending this event tonight. It's a really honor for me kicking off a series of lectures on media ecology in the Cátedra Éric McLuhan, remembering, fostering the legacy of this great human being and intellectual. So I'm very, very grateful to be here, and well, I can't wait to share some of my insights, some of my inspirations for thinking and rethinking media ecology, finding probably new trajectories, new opportunities for understanding how the media ecology intellectual tradition can help us to envision a more sustainable future, right? And so I'll please join me into this journey. And I wanted to share some well, private memories actually about Eric. I met Eric back in 2011. He was in Bologna. You know, I've been teaching 15 years at the University of Bologna. Bologna is my alma mater. And celebrating the 100th anniversary of Marshall McLuhan back in 2011, we invited Eric. So I met him for the first time there, nine years ago. It was an unforgettable meeting, encounter. So I really perceived the depth of Eric and his intellectual spirit. And so this is here with my colleague Elena Lamberti, by the way. Then eventually we met again in 2011 with Eric. And this is something that I'm very, very proud of. This is St. Michael's College. At St. Michael's College, oh yeah, there is an intruder again. But at St. Michael's College in 2011, again, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Marshall McLuhan, St. Michael's College gave to Eric a unique acknowledgement, intellectual acknowledgement, a honorary doctorate on sacred lectures at St. Michael's College. And this is very meaningful. This is particularly meaningful because St. Michael's College in the University of Toronto is where Marshall McLuhan used to teach. And there is a genuine humanistic intellectual tradition there. And Eric was able to continue this genuine humanistic intellectual tradition. His curiosity for the most genuine medieval philosophy, and then the most genuine humanistic intellectual legacy really made Eric a great humanist, right? So able to appreciate the value of human being, the value of the humanities, and to some extent, this is an important message to retrieve the humanistic roots of media studies. When we do deal with media and communication, we actually have to remember that media and communication studies and the very intellectual tradition of the media ecology is deeply rooted into the humanities. Marshall McLuhan, and not by chance, was a professor of English literature. Eric was a fine humanist, right? And this combination of ideas, a combination of different intellectual insights really made the media studies as a field of study germinate and spark from Toronto and other places in the world, but particularly in St. Michael's College, thanks to first Marshall and then Eric, really we could appreciate how important is this humanistic root of media studies. And then I wanted to share another Torontonian memory. This is Ryerson University. Ryerson University is one of the universities in Toronto. And here again, so there is Andrew. I met Andrew there, and it was a beautiful encounter. At Ryerson University, there is a special seminar room on Marshall McLuhan. And the city of Toronto actually played a very important role to establish what is known as the Toronto School of Communication, right? The Toronto School of Communication. Intellectual giants as Marshall McLuhan, Harold Innis, Northrop Frye really fired the global imagination. Those were the pioneers, and I do consider Eric a champion of the Toronto School there, so able to continue that intellectual legacy in the under the banner, the auspices of the Toronto School of Communication. And in fact, Eric played a role even here. This is the inaugural seminar at the Marshall McLuhan Center for Culture and Technology in Toronto. He came to deliver some good wishes and greetings to start up again when I moved to Toronto in 2015, a new series of appointments and meetings focused on, again, the legacy of the Toronto School. And finally, well, 2018, I was supposed to be with Eric at La Savannah. I was supposed to be with Eric then, for many reasons I couldn't make it. And we know he passed away, but he left a legacy, an intellectual and spiritual legacy, and the one that Andrew was mentioning. And thanks to Andrew, actually, I have the Eric's own words about courage, about be brave, about the opportunity for exploring new trajectories in media studies and in the very field of media ecology. Courage. Since then, thanks to Andrew, that I was able to share this very intimate but deep message of hope, since then, I've been thinking about this courage and how we can turn this very unique and profound word into a practice, into a practical outcome. And so I'll show you a few examples, a few ideas, a few insights tonight in order to really turn this courage into a practical outcome. And firstly, in Toronto, close by, just on the St. Michael's College campus and just near to the McLuhan Center, there is a way, there is a street, which is called Marshall McLuhan Way. And I like to think of this in a double sense, as a way, as a street, but also as a way of thinking, right? I like to borrow B.W. Spau words. B.W. Spau is a Canadian intellectual been working on Marshall and McLuhan and Northrop Frye. So he said something that, and it's true actually, St. Joseph Street in Toronto connects the University of Toronto campus to Bay Street, which is a kind of a commercial epicenter for the city of Toronto, right? It's the business epicenter for the city of Toronto. And so symbolically, Marshall McLuhan's Way connects the university to the city. And I like to think of this special link, this special connection, as a way to rethink the way we undertake our role in education within the university. So to step out of the university and into the city, to really explore the city as a classroom. And in fact, city as classroom was one of the most important books and works published, authored by Marshall and Eric McLuhan and Kathy Acham Kawasaki. It was a unique pioneeristic work to really rethink the city, the urban environment as a learning environment, the city as a classroom. And in fact, again, I think the city as a classroom is one of the most important legacies that Eric was able to leave us, right? So a legacy in, again, stepping out of the university, right? In putting our hands on the real life, the daily life, to apply theoretical understandings into a practical environment. And so I think we should really take into account this important legacy, this important approach to conceive the city as a classroom. And in fact, again, I will attempt to find some ways to be practical and proactive in the very way of thinking and rethinking the very field of media ecology. But a few years ago, I wanted to share with you, a few years ago, I've been started mapping the media ecology intellectual tradition, right? Here you see different schools of thoughts, the Toronto School of Communication, the New York School, the Chicago School of Media, of Human Ecology, and many other intellectual circles, invisible circles that really shape the whole intellectual history of the media ecology, right? And in Toronto, on top, here you see Eric and Marshall McLuhan, along with many other representatives of this intellectual tradition. I also wrote a book to present, to introduce the very field of media ecology in Italy, right? So we are all pioneering this intellectual tradition. And so if you search on Google, you will find the media ecology map, and there's a way to grasp at a glance the humanistic and intellectual traditions that shaped the very field of media ecology, right? The media ecology as a field of studies. However, again, we are trying tonight to go beyond the idea of media ecology just as a field of study. We are turning the media ecology into a practical tool, a pragmatic tool to foster social change, right? In conceiving media as environments, we can approach media as strategic factors for fostering social change, for fostering sustainable development. And in fact, I like to start with this kind of invitation, right? The idea that we rethink the media ecology, not just as an intellectual tradition, but as a intellectual practice, something that we practice, we learn and we practice. And well, to be practicing, to turn the media ecology intellectual tradition into a practice, I think we should rethink our role as scholars, as students, professors, or citizens in our society. But in order to in order to get a proactive approach, in order to adopt a proactive approach that will make a difference in the way we again turn the media ecology into an intellectual practice. And here we are, in fact, it's a call to action. My lecture today aims at inspiring a call to action, to rethink media ecology in the 21st century. We should conceive media ecology and our practice as media ecologists in a sort of activism, right? And being active in applying media ecology to not only understand the world around us, but to change the world around us, to change how we are dealing with social changes and dealing with these unexpected consequences of new technologies, emerging technologies, or emerging crises, unexpected crises like the COVID-19 global pandemic. So it's a call to action. It's a media ecology activism. Try to get this activism as an attitude for today's lecture, okay? Try to enter into this mood, the attitude of being activists in the media environment, being activists to rethink, reimagine the world we live in. And in fact, the world we live in can be a classroom, right? The world as a classroom. We are learning a lot, particularly in this moment of a global crisis. The world can be our classroom. The hyper-connected world can teach us, can let us discover and explore new opportunities. I like to think the world, the digital world, as a classroom where we can learn and we can, again, apply this proactive approach, the activism in media ecology. And to rethink media ecology in a practical and pragmatic way, I wanted to share three pillars. I'm in Toronto. I'm the director of the Media Ethics Lab. We wanted to identify three pillars for reimaging research, teaching, public discourse in the university and beyond. So the three intellectual pillars that I think can inspire this way of rethinking media ecology, not just as an intellectual tradition, but as a practice, as an activism, are the research, but it's called open research, integrated learning, and civic engagement. Open research means that is not a traditional research. It's not just writing papers or publishing. It's not just creating redundancy, creating more publications, and then recreating the same things. The idea of an open research is a kind of research that involves stakeholders in society, that extends and involves a network of partners, that again steps out to the university and into the real city, into the real life. It's a different way of conceiving research. It's an open research. And again, this is a call to action. If we want to rethink media ecology as an intellectual tradition in a more practical way, we need to open up our research, open up our research horizons, right? To go beyond the standards, beyond everything we take for granted. And so the open research steps out of the university and into the real life, involving the real society. Then the integrated learning. So we are learning a lot, but the learning is an ongoing process, must be integrated, must be experiential, right? The experiential learning must be beyond the traditional standards, the traditional practices. So rethinking education means rethinking the way we provide integrated, holistic, connected learning, where learning means exploring, learning means playing with ideas in a different way. And so as educators, as media ecology activists, I think we can explore the very idea of integrated learning. And finally, civic engagement. Everything we do can have an impact in society. And the more we engage with society, with the city as a classroom, with the city and the urban environment, the more as researchers, as educators, we step out of the university and into the real society, the more we can enjoy, right, the pleasure of civic engagement, the pleasure of living the social change, living in the middle of that social change, so where real life really happens. And so with these three pillars, I like to, again, rethink the mindset in envisioning new trajectories for the media ethics, the media ecology approach. And of course, this is a framework, right? It's a framework of possible new understandings, new approaches to rethink media ecology, but we need to see what's going on around us. And I like to share this fundamental question. So if we want to be active, proactive, apply media ecology, and rethinking the way we understand media ecology, this is a fundamental question in this moment. What are we learning? What are the lessons we are learning in the current scenario? What are the lessons that we can explore in order to make sense of what's going on around us, right? And making this question is a way to explore who we are in this particular moment, to explore our role as educators, as scholars, as students, right? This is a fundamental question. In a few months, the world changed. We were not ready. We were not ready. So I think the value of this particular moment is that we are learning. It's a moment in which we can learn in a much better way how to deal, how to understand, and how to act in society. For instance, we have been living in a new semantic environment since the beginning of the pandemic. We've been feeling a different, meaningful environment around us. The semantic environment started spreading different ideas, different feelings and fears. Even the language that started circulating expresses the new semantic environment. And this semantic environment, which is represented in this picture, is a way, you know, we started thinking of the COVID-19 as an enemy, right? As an invisible enemy. We were in a war against the enemy. And so there were fighters, there were fears. Under this banner, under this semantic environment, again, our way of thinking, our way of feeling, our way of acting changed dramatically. And sometimes we are not aware of the semantic environment. We are not aware of how the language, the words we use affect the way we think. And so being activist in media ecology means also reflecting on the very words we use, the language we use, the shape we gave to our thoughts to describe reality around us. And so working as with a media ecology approach on a semantic environment means envisioning a different semantic environment, maybe trying to fix the semantic environment, trying to fix what we don't like. I'll give you an example. Infodemic. Under since the beginning of the global pandemic, an information pollution spread all throughout the world. an information pollution against science, against opinions, against different interpretations of the actual economic or health impact of the virus. So a misinformation reached its highest peak during the pandemic. And again, we were not ready to deal with this information pollution. And what is the role of media ecology? What is the role to make sense of the semantic environment? Is to clean this information pollution, is to be aware of the way, the tools, the practice we have to change, to foster a different approach, right, to the very way of spreading misinformation in our information environment. Another example, talking about, again, language and the very idea of conceptualizing the world around us. That has been circulating on Instagram. And yes, this is Madonna, and she posted a very popular and concerning post to say that, okay, the COVID-19, the coronavirus, is the great equalizer. We are all equal against the virus. We are all the same situation. We are all equal because the virus is the great equalizer. So that being said by a popular pop star in her bathtub with petals floating around. So the virus was not an equalizer. Rather than thinking in terms of equalizer, we can really see what happens, what is happening right now. This global pandemic is more as an intensifier. Everything is getting more intense, for the good and for the bad, but more intensity, the intensification, the very virus as an intensifier is affecting our society in different ways. Those who are the richest are getting even more rich. Those who are suffering the most disadvantaged communities, the most underserved communities are getting worse and worse. So the virus was not an equalizer, it was an intensifier. Everything is getting more intense. Economic inequality is getting more intense and more and higher and larger difference between different social classes. And the health systems, the intensification of the caused by the virus has shown that there are still today very important problems with the health systems. And so that was another intensification. The social fabric, think about cultural, this cultural sector, the artistic sector, education, learning. We realized how fragile is our social fabric. We got lost. We were, lots of families were not able to really support their kids for e-learning and remote learning. So the social fabric was too weak. We weren't ready. And so the virus intensified the situation. And racial injustice, not by chance, we are witnessing the emerging of new racial injustice, even because of this global pandemic, because the global pandemic is creating a defragmentation of our social fabric. And then political division, again, the virus is not an equalizer. There are huge differences in global leaders. There are leaders that are not doing enough to being a real leader in this moment, in this situation. And not all countries are fostering a sense of togetherness and collaboration and global collaboration. Some countries are just trying to fix their own things inside their countries and closing the borders, not just for safety, but to again to fulfill that sense of a fear, the sense of uncertainty, right? So not all political countries, not all political leaders are equal. So they are very different. And then eventually the climate emergency. We are no longer talking about the climate emergency, the climate the change. I like to call it climate emergency. It's an emergency. The virus and the pandemic is getting very clear that there is an emergency, but that emergency came on a second level. So we are no longer focusing on what's matter, what is important in contemporary society nowadays, such as the climate emergency, which is, by the way, deeply connected to the new configuration of the health environment in the world. So everything is connected. And so all those intensifications really created a very unstable and very tough situation. That's why, again, it's a call to action. Under the pars destruens, so now we have seen the most challenging issues. Now we're going to see how we can approach these challenges and think in a different way. And I wanted to start by, again, approaching these issues, approaching the current situation with another important question. The important question, or at least a statement. The statement is the future we want. In this particular moment, if we want to be activists in media ecology, let's start by putting this question at the center of our discussions. What kind of future we want? Not the new normal, but possibly a better normal. The future we want. That indeed was the title of an important conference in Rio de Janeiro, where countries of all around the world gathered together to foster a mid-long-term vision for the future of humanity. It's a fundamental question. And as a fundamental question, if we want to look beyond the current crisis, if we want to look beyond the global pandemic we are in now, so let's try to focus on this kind of question, on this statement. What kind of future we want? And from a media ecological perspective, maybe there is a future we want. There is a future that we can envision and then that can balance this uncertainty in society. The future we want has two colors, and I'm going to borrow a concept argued by University of Oxford University scholar Luciano Floridi, which is the blue and the green. The blue and the green means the marriage between technology and environment, and the marriage between our information society, the knowledge society, where we have the means for exploring new opportunities, for providing our society with new means for creating a better future. And on the other hand, the green, the environment, to understand how important it is taking care of our natural environment, of our house. After all, ecology means the house within which we live. But media ecology provides us with a different approach. It's not the old ecologism. It's a new kind of ecologism. It's I call it ecological consciousness. So it's a consciousness that enables us to think holistically, to think as a system, to balance, right, green economy and the blue innovation, where the green and the blue can cooperate, can create a better future for our humanity. And again, if we want to combine these two aspects in society, the blue and the green, the information and communication technologies and the natural environment within which we live, we need to make an extra effort. And this kind of effort is already part of the media ecology intellectual tradition, which is conceiving media ecology as a science of relationships. In the media ecology, we mastered the art of connecting things, creating new connections, new understanding, new relations between things. And so it's not just a design thinking, it's a systemic thinking. So we think systemically, we think holistically. This is all about the media ecological approach we are learning, we are exploring. And in fact, if we want to use media ecology as a science of relationships, we have a goal. We have a possible positive scenario for our society. And it's a human project. It's a human project where we apply media ecology in a different way, where media ecology comes to be a human ecology, where the balance between humans and the environment, humans and technology, can really provide us with the right kind of subsoil to improve and foster our social change, rather than just following the technological development. No, we humans are able to design and create this human project. And so there are some important shifts that we should be aware in order to, again, create envisioning this human project. The 20th century was the century of ideologies, great ideologists, even capitalism, even the business models that are running our contemporary digital platforms are business model mainly based on the old 20th century ideologies and profitable, the ideology of profit and capitalism. Or another shift. So from ideologies, we can go to ethics, right? So we let ethics lead our development and not just ideologies. Products from the 20th century attention to the production means, to contents, to things, we shift toward the experiences. Is the economy of experiences, where people can experience new ways of living. Another shift is the smart cities, smart technologies, smart whatever, to sustainable cities, sustainable technologies. This is a fundamental shift. Smart is not sufficient. We need to get smarter, sure, but we need to get even more sustainable. From the linear to circular, the linear economy, typical 20th century economical approach, the linear growth, the linear development, the linear innovation. So we can replace the very idea of linear development into a circular development, where everything is consistent, where there is a circular economy, there is a circularity, there is a cycle, a life cycle of the things we create, not just linear, as circular. And then eventually the speed, right? So rather than just letting the speed of innovation lead our emerging technologies, rather than rushing and running and let the speed of innovation lead, we can focus on what kind of direction we want to take, not just following the speed of innovation, but what's the direction? What's the the path, what's the way we want to take, right? And in fact, we come back to ethics. If we want to really envision a way to explore emerging technologies, ethics is the key. And well, this is a beautiful human project, but we need some practical means, or some practical tools, and maybe we need an agenda, right? We need an agenda to achieve those goals. But the agenda, it's already there. We have already an agenda. And this agenda is the Agenda 2030, the agenda for sustainable development, a holistic vision that really creates the conditions for fostering this kind of changes, and to rethink our digital environment, and create a digital environment which is open, inclusive, equitable, right? We have the agenda. We have the awareness, that holistic awareness, which is at the core of the media ecology tradition. We have an agenda. It's time to act. It's time to take action. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's the Agenda 2030. It's 10 years away. There are 17 goals. All aspects in society are covered by the 17 goals. And the goals are not just ideal goals, ideals that can inspire us. They are very practical understanding, very practical outcomes. There are 169 targets for all those goals. In any aspect in society, you see education, economic growth, and gender equity, and many others. All aspects in society, in a very holistic way, are already there. We have an agenda. And so, as researchers, as media scholars and media ecologists, how can we address these 17 global goals, United Nations global goals? How can we address the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? And again, we have a tool, and we have also a strategy. The strategy is that we can apply open research to better understand, to integrate research and the Sustainable Development Goals, to make the SDGs, the global goals, inform our research. How this research project is going to advance SDGs? That's a good question. How this research project can help addressing some of the indicators and targets which are part of the SDGs. And again, integrated learning, how the way we teach can be consistent and can align to the global goals. How can we integrate the global goals into our curriculum, rethinking the educational curriculum based on the global goals? And then, of course, the civic engagement. So if we want to really take action for the global goals, we need to go into the society and engaging, involving, promoting awareness about the global goals, right? To foster a new way of thinking of the future, a new way of thinking the future we want. We have a great question, the future we want. We have a tool, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have a practical approach, the media ecology activism, to make that happen. And we are 10 years away. It's 2020, the agenda is 2030, so the global goals are set for the 2030, and this is called the decade of action. We are just 10 years away. It's a decade. We have the opportunity to take actions. We have an opportunity for creating the conditions of turning those goals into practical actions, into pragmatical outcomes that can really make a difference in the way we do research, in the way we do learning and teaching, in the way we do civic engagement. And so, under the auspices of Eric McLuhan's brave spirit, under the auspices of that source of inspiration that was Eric McLuhan, I invite you to take action. I invite you to be activist and active media ecologist. I invite you to look beyond, to look ahead of 10 years, to look at the kind of world we want to see in 2030, and to not only have a decade of action, but also create a decade of courage. The decade of courage that as the ultimate legacy of Eric. Let's take an action. Let's create, under the auspices of Eric McLuhan's brave spirit, a decade of action in the media ecology tradition. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Granata, for your intervention. It was amazing and I think very interesting for all of us to listen to you and to have this opportunity in order to know a little bit more about media ecology. So, muchas gracias, Profesor Granata. Vamos entonces a continuar con la sesión de preguntas formuladas por el público. Voy a leer las que están en español y luego las traduciremos a inglés para darle la oportunidad al profesor Granata. So the first question, Professor Granata, is how do you think that the education in middle and high school could be better taking into account the media ecology focus?
Well, wonderful question. Learning is an ongoing process. Learning is an environment. The school is an environment. The first, I think, advice is understanding the digital environment within which high school students, youth in general, are living, right? We need to understand that environment. That was the first insight, for instance, by Marshall McLuhan, who back in the 30s and 40s, he wanted to understand advertising as a learning environment within which at that time students were more approachable. And so the first thing is understanding the environment within which we live, not just being critical. Of course, we have to approach critically what's around us, all emerging platforms and so on. But being critical, but also being curious to understand the language. If we don't understand the language, we cannot help our youth to make sense of the digital environment within which they live. So again, not just a critical approach, but a genuine curiosity, right? To understand the language, and only if you understand the language, then you can understand the actual change in behavior and perception that the new technologies environment creates on us.
Bueno, el profesor Granata, la pregunta fue que cómo podía aplicarse la ecología de medios en un contexto de la educación superior o la educación media. Lo que el profesor nos cuenta es que básicamente el tema va más allá de ser críticos directamente, sino que tiene que ver con entender el lenguaje en el cual estamos inmersos para que nuestra juventud de esa manera pueda recibir una educación mucho más amplia y mucho más relacionada al mundo en el cual nos movemos. So next question, Professor Granata, is please tell us about your experience with UNICEF. How are you applying media ecology in the UNICEF direction and how Canada is doing right now?
So I didn't get in the uni.
In UNICEF.
Oh, UNESCO.
Yeah, UNESCO. Yeah,
UNESCO,
I think
yes.
Here they wrote UNICEF, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. UNESCO is the cultural heritage organization of the United Nations. And the United Nations are the entity, right, that really represents the entire world, the entire human family, right? Or as Douglas Rushkoff likes to say, the team human, right? So UNESCO is the United Nations are the place where the human family gather together to envision the world that we want to. And particularly, if we, for instance, read entirely the Agenda 2030, the Agenda 2030 is the most relevant, compelling, beautiful description of how the world could be in 2030, in 10 years. And so my practical work is that at the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, we do involve experts from civil society, organizations, private and public sectors, universities. We do involve those experts. We do involve representatives of civil society to address some priorities. One priority, for instance, we are working right now is ethics of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is an important change and factor of change in society. So we are urging, we are advocating for an ethical approach to the way we use artificial intelligence. Another commission is on culture. Culture in this particular moment, in this particular pandemic moment, is at stake. It's at risk. Right? So there is a great risk that the cultural sector won't be able to really express and provide people with the means for participation. Democracy is another priority. So we identify some practical priorities, and then we start a process of consultations, networking. To some extent, is a community building exercise, because around those important topics, we want to all representatives of the civil society coming together and take actions and take possible ethical decisions.
Okay, so la pregunta era ¿cuál ha sido su labor o cómo ha manejado el tema en la UNESCO, a la cual el profesor Granata es miembro? Y lo que él nos cuenta es que se han definido desde la UNESCO varias prioridades prácticas. Entre esas, la cultura, la democracia y, por ejemplo, algunos proyectos concretos como la ética en la inteligencia artificial, cómo esto está afectando nuestro mundo actual, sobre todo porque en el trabajo que se está haciendo desde la UNESCO también se está teniendo en cuenta a la sociedad civil como parte de ese trabajo constructivo entre las diferentes partes, no solamente los académicos y los directivos, sino también a la sociedad, para darle un contexto mucho más viable y construir comunidad desde la labor directamente de la UNESCO. Seguimos acá con la siguiente pregunta. So, Professor Granata, it says, how we can make that the open research looks like something daily in the life that we are living in the university today? How can we do this more approachable from the university life?
Yeah. Well, my answer, community partnerships. So as usually in the university, we are pretty isolated, right? Instead, there are communities in the city, organizations, third sector, public and private sector. There are communities and organizations in the city that are very, very keen to be involved, to participate, right? So it's a networking exercise to reach out to these communities and organizations in the city and working with them. For instance, in Toronto, with my Media Ethics Lab, we established a partnership with the Mozilla Foundation, which is in Toronto. And so with Mozilla Foundation, we have been working on the Internet Health Report to evaluate the healthiness of our internet environment. So there are dozens, tons of possible organizations in our civil society that are very keen, that are waiting for us to step in and establish that collaboration.
Perfect. La pregunta era, ¿cómo podemos vivir en la vida de la universidad a diario este concepto de investigación abierta? Y la respuesta del profesor Granata va hacia la necesidad de realizar alianzas, de generar lazos con la comunidad, no solamente con las organizaciones que son iguales a las otras universidades, sino también con organizaciones como ONGs o compañías que nos permitan generar este nuevo conocimiento. Bien, seguimos con la pregunta de Francisco Huitrago. So, Mr. Granata, how can the mass media be productive in the world of communication and participate in this vision?
Well, that's a great question. Media have to take their part in this. Addressing some ethical issues, right? Talking about journalism, talking about media practices. There are some ethical issues that then cannot not take into account. So we have already good practices. There are international and national organizations focused on ethics in journalism, ethics in the way we undertake with information. So there are organizations in the civil society, but sometimes the media world do not take them into account. That's why, again, the solution is firstly to take a responsibility, because if we want to talk about ethics, ethics means taking the responsibility for what we are doing. And to improve what we are doing, we need to reach out to those organizations in civil society that are building great stuff, that are doing great things into this sector. And again, the example of ethics in journalism is a perfect example to better understand the potential that a kind of bottom-up approach has to have an impact on the, let's say, legacy media organizations.
Perfecto. Entonces, la pregunta era sobre el papel de los medios en toda esta situación de la ecología de medios, a lo que el profesor Granata contesta que la solución es tomar responsabilidad por parte de los medios de comunicación, desde el periodismo, desde todas las áreas, teniendo en cuenta el poder de influencia que tienen los medios, ser ético frente a lo que se publica, frente a las decisiones que se toman, puesto que el potencial de los medios de comunicación en general es bastante fuerte y puede afectar a la sociedad en general si no se realiza de forma correcta. Por eso es necesario que los medios de comunicación asuman un rol activo y realista dentro de este contexto de la ecología de medios. Entonces, la siguiente pregunta, next question is, how are governments involved in these visions for the future?
Great question as well, thank you. And well, there are different approaches. For instance, in Europe, governments have a major impact in decision-making and policy-making, right? It's a more regulatory approach. For instance, in North America, it's the opposite. So it's the market that regulates itself. And so I think we can reach something in between. Of course, we cannot let, say, social media platforms to regulate themselves and establish their own ethical guidelines. There must be a balance, there must be a dialogue between private sectors and governments in order to achieve that kind of synergy, that kind of collaboration between governments and the private sector. We cannot let the private sector lead the world we live in. We did this mistake back in the 90s. We let the internet grow as a wild forest, and then eventually now it's controlled by a few private companies. Instead, a participatory approach where governments, public and private institutions gather together in a dialogue, that's a model to, again, provide an ethical design, an ethics by design to our emerging technologies.
Perfect, Professor Granata. I was trying to following like everything you were saying. Entonces, la pregunta era relacionada al gobierno. ¿Cuál es el papel del gobierno en este contexto de la ecología de medios? Y el profesor Granata nos cuenta que no podemos dejar o no podemos pensar que las plataformas de medios de comunicación se van a regular por sí mismas. Nos habla del ejemplo del Internet en los años 90, cuando de repente empezó a crecer de manera desaforada sin ningún tipo de regulación y de repente ya era muy difícil de controlar. Lo que el profesor Granata propone es la necesidad de que exista un diálogo que los ponga a todos en el mismo plano, tanto a las instituciones públicas, el gobierno, las instituciones privadas, para tomar así decisiones que puedan ayudar o impactar positivamente el mundo. Voy a leer dos preguntas más. Y siguiente. So the next question is made by Laura Verónica. Professor, what do you think about the message that has the global climate youth movement? I think about climate change.
Yeah, Laura, thank you. And thank you for raising this point. Well, climate change is not just an environmental problem. It is related to the whole society, to economic, to the digital society. Everything in society is deeply connected. If we still think in terms of, okay, this is an environmental problem, it will not easy to fix it, right? Just from one perspective. We need to approach the environmental crisis, the climate crisis, putting together all players in society, all actors in society. That's why the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are connected. Because in order to fix in a system, you cannot just fix one part of the system. You have to look at the whole picture. The whole system must be capable of addressing that issue. The climate change issue is not just an environmental problem. It's a society and economic problem. And only from different perspectives we can seriously address it.
So, Professor Granata was, la pregunta iba enfocada hacia su perspectiva o su opinión sobre el movimiento juvenil o los conceptos que se tienen ver en el tema del cambio climático. Y la respuesta del profesor Granata va enfocada hacia la percepción o la visión de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, donde en realidad hay que mirar la fotografía completa. Lo que él nos invita a hacer es a mirar que el problema del cambio climático no es solamente un tema de clima, es un tema mucho más general, mucho más amplio, que afecta políticamente, económicamente a la sociedad, y así hay que mirar desde cualquier tipo de movimiento este tipo de realidades, verlo desde una perspectiva más amplia, más generalista, donde podamos conservar o apreciar la foto completa. Entonces, eso es lo que nos invita el profesor Granata con su intervención. Como les conté, vamos entonces a realizar la última pregunta. Professor Granata, we're going to do the last question. This is Victor Garcia question. So, Dr. Granata, thanks for your conference, a really interesting approach. One of the difficulties of media ecology is precisely that it's a broad frame, so it is difficult to put in practice. In your conference, you mentioned the transformation of media ecology to a pragmatic tool for fostering change. Could you elaborate a little bit more about some of the media ecology tools to put this theoretical framework into action and generate activism?
Thank you. Great question. Systemic thinking. Media ecology is rooted into the very idea of a holistic and systemic thinking, looking at things and looking at the relationships between things. So practical tool is that in any field we want to apply a media ecological approach, looking at connections, not just looking at things, not just looking at specializations or specific skills. Let's step a little bit backward and try to understand the patterns, right? The patterns those invisible patterns that really shape that framework. So practical example is that looking at relationships and focusing on connections between different fields of study, different disciplines, different scopes and subjects, right? That's the power of media ecology, looking in betweens, looking in at the connections between things. Another important practical tool is to use practical examples of our digital world, our society. So taking some practices and analyzing those practices through the lens of media ecology. To some extent, we take for granted how those brand new technologies affect our life. So the media ecologist tool goes to not to analyze, but also to reveal, right? Reveal the that invisible nature of change, which is embedded in any new technology.
Perfect. Entonces, la pregunta se refería a las herramientas prácticas que se pueden ofrecer o se pueden generar desde la ecología de medios. El profesor Granata plantea que es necesario tener un pensamiento sistemático donde se comiencen a entender los patrones invisibles, esas brechas de unión entre diferentes disciplinas, revisar esas conexiones, acercarse hacia ese entorno de una manera más realista en la que se encuentren esos espacios comunes para poder conectar con ese tipo de ideas que los patrones invisibles generan y que nos pueden ofrecer desde la ecología de medios. Thanks to you, Professor Paolo, for being here, for all your patience. There are so many questions in our Q&A pool. It's a shame we couldn't answer all of them, but for sure, I think all of the assistants had a really good spectrum of what you want to share with us today. So thank you in advance for your participation and for your time and your conference here. It was really, really nice to hear from you and from all of your knowledge and your wisdom today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Angelica, for such a good synthesis of my answers, so even better than the actual answers. So thank you very much. Thank you all for this engagement. We need to keep these discussions going. So we need to foster the value of discussion, the value of conversation. In a kind of a detached virtual digital world, let's retrieve the value of conversation. Let's keep discussing on and on and on. It's a dialogue. It's a human nature. It's our human nature. Let's keep this dialogue going on.
Muchísimas gracias, profesor, de verdad, por su intervención. Dice el profesor que por favor continuemos con la conversación, continuemos con el diálogo y con el debate. Antes de despedirnos, quiero darle nuevamente la palabra a nuestro señor decano de la Facultad de Comunicación, doctor Manuel Ignacio González Bernal.
Bueno, Angélica, muchas gracias. Paolo, thanks. Was nice, your presentation, your speech. We hope that in the future we can share more spaces with you. Thank you very much. Para todas las personas que nos pudieron acompañar en esta tarde de lanzamiento del segundo año de la Cátedra Éric McLuhan, un agradecimiento muy especial. En nombre de la Facultad de Comunicación de la Universidad de La Sabana, en nombre del doctorado en Comunicación y de todo el equipo que hace posible que podamos ofrecer estos espacios de formación y de reflexión. Un agradecimiento muy especial a María Paula, a Angélica, por estar acompañándonos en la traducción. Por supuesto, para la doctora Ángela Preciado, que hoy no nos puede acompañar por algunos quebrantos de salud. Esperemos que se recupere muy pronto. Y a todos los profesores que hacen parte de este programa académico. También un saludo y un agradecimiento muy especial a los estudiantes del doctorado que nos han estado acompañando. De verdad, para la facultad es un honor tener invitados como Paolo, tener amigos e invitados como Andrew, que en el fondo nos conectan con el mundo y que nos permiten tener conversaciones tan interesantes y tan formativas como las que hemos tenido en esta tarde. Andrew, también quisiera mandarte un saludo, un abrazo y bueno, decirte que siempre la facultad será tu casa. Paolo, thank you very much for your time, for your generosity with the Universidad de La Sabana. See you soon. Bye bye.
A todos ustedes les damos las gracias por acompañarnos en la jornada de hoy y los invitamos a que se conecten a las próximas 2 conferencias que se realizarán el jueves 15 de octubre con el profesor internacional Ramón Salaverría de la Universidad de Navarra y para cerrar el jueves 12 de noviembre con la profesora Ana María Córdoba de la Universidad de La Sabana. Muchas gracias por su asistencia y que tengan buena noche. Hasta pronto.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Ciao, Paolo.